In the last 20 years, the US has pumped out over 25 times more money into the system. But oddly, our paychecks haven't kept up. There's this puzzling phenomenon most Americans feel. Even though money is being printed in massive amounts every year, somehow wages stay almost frozen. This isn't just a US issue. It's seen in Europe, Japan, and globally. It's one of the strangest financial mysteries in modern economies. Have you ever paused to ask yourself why this happens? See, in theory, the total money in circulation should match the total value of all goods and services. For instance, if everything in the US is worth $1 trillion, then printing $1 trillion in money seems logical. That way, supply meets demand. Makes perfect sense, right? But that perfect balance never really plays out in real life. Too many variables distort it. For example, ultra-wealthy individuals can't even spend all their wealth. A huge chunk sits idle. Some people save instead of spend, keeping cash out of circulation. And ever since the Industrial Revolution, production has exploded, flooding the market with goods. If there isn't enough money chasing those goods, we hit a wall. Products can't be sold. When oversupply meets underspending, economies collapse and wars begin. That's one of the lesser-known triggers of World War I and World War II. Don't believe it? Let me break it down. Why did World War I really begin? Around 1910, global resistance to colonial powers surged. Colonized regions rejected European imports. European markets overflowed with unsold goods. Factories closed. Workers lost jobs. Economic collapse set in. The solution? War. Leaders used conflict to distract citizens, burn through excess production, and shift blame outward. So, in 1914, global powers went to war. As soon as war broke out, unemployment was no longer the focus. Bombs, not bills, became the priority. The war industry destroyed infrastructure and factories, which conveniently wiped out overproduction. After World War I, Europe was left in ruins. Tragic, of course, but to certain power brokers behind the scenes, it was also a massive opportunity. Rebuilding from rubble meant stimulating the economy. With reconstruction came demand, and with demand came growth. That post-war period? A golden era for European capitalism. In cities once ruled by horse-drawn carriages, sleek automobiles took over. It felt like a new beginning. People believed, optimistically, that modern industry would finally eliminate hunger and hardship. A new age seemed to be dawning. But in capitalist nations, sustained growth always hits a wall. Surpluses become inevitable. Because wealth keeps pooling at the top. The rich get richer. The working class falls behind. When people can't afford to spend, goods pile up again. Jobs vanish. Factories shut down. The cycle resets. This time, though, it was catastrophic. The 1929 crash hit hard. Wall Street tanked. Businesses folded. Banks failed. Workers were laid off. And GDP dropped nearly 70%. The country entered a dark economic spiral. Just how bad was it? Historical accounts tell us farmland was destroyed to burn wheat as fuel. Milk was dumped into rivers, all while cities were full of hungry, homeless citizens. Makeshift shelters were built from scraps. Fuel was unaffordable. Some who once wore suits now peddled apples on sidewalks. Over 8 million Americans unemployed. Millions of kids dropped out of school. Hunger was everywhere. And it wasn't just poverty. It was death. In New York alone, over 2,000 died in a single year. Just imagine what was happening elsewhere. How did we climb out of that hole? Many point to FDR's New Deal, but truthfully, it was World War II. In 1930, the US passed the Smoot-Hawley tariff, jacking up import taxes by 50%. It tanked Germany's economy, which relied on exports to repay loans. Desperate, Germany chose an extremist leader. Then, in 1941, after Pearl Harbor, the US joined World War II. European and Asian cities were bombed into rubble. The US sold arms and oil, then led post-war reconstruction. This revived the American economy. So yes, some claim World War II was orchestrated. Some argue Pearl Harbor was no surprise. It was a turning point for US dominance. It ended British imperial rule and launched America into global leadership. True or not, one thing is certain. Since World War II, Western nations learned that productivity without demand leads to collapse. So they kept printing money. Whether people can afford goods or not doesn't matter as much. What matters is keeping spending alive. That way, economies stay afloat, and another crash is delayed. Especially in the 1970s, the US and allies realized people must spend. But what if people won't spend? That's where consumerism came in. What if they can't spend? That's where bank credit took over. One way or another, money had to reach people's hands. If you study recent history, you'll notice, ever since the US dropped the gold standard, the Fed has borrowed and printed endlessly. It's almost second nature now, and it's the only thing preventing total collapse. Every time wallets thin out and crisis looms, the money printer kicks in. Take 2020, for example. During the pandemic, millions lost jobs. What did the government do? Stimulus checks, non-stop. People could eat and pay rent. Protests faded. But this solution isn't sustainable. Imagine this. You hold $1 million check today. You live like a millionaire. But if you haven't earned it yet and your future's uncertain, is that lifestyle real or borrowed? If you never earn that million, the risk is massive. This is how the West functions now, walking a tightrope of debt-fueled consumption. Any single failure could trigger a domino collapse, dragging the US and allies into another depression. History shows that would mean 60% drops in income and GDP. So why keep printing money? Because it keeps society running. It delays collapse. Without it, chaos returns. But where does all that money go? Most of it doesn't end up with regular people. Printing money isn't handing out bills. It's done through the financial system. Indirect, complex, and targeted. Not a stack of hundreds in your mailbox. No government does that. They work through stimulus, subsidies, and incentives. In the US, for instance, we've seen vouchers, credits, and tax relief. From food stamps to gas rebates, these are forms of indirect cash support. They ease the cost of living and stimulate growth. Another method? Lowering interest rates. Makes borrowing easier, encouraging spending and expansion. Companies borrow, grow, and maybe raise wages. When they scale, you might benefit. But here's the catch. Who actually gets the money? Not you or me. Banks lend to big players first. Try walking in with no assets and asking for 100K. You'll be laughed out. But if you're a CEO or buying real estate, different story. Every round of printing enriches investors, not workers. Of that printed cash, the top tier gets first dibs. It's just how the system is wired. The everyday citizen gets the crumbs through paychecks, loans, or inflation. If $100 is printed, $40 goes to corporations, another $40 flows to markets, and just $20 might trickle down to workers. That's the reality. To get $100 into your pocket, the Fed might have to print $300. Want proof? Back in 1999, US M2 money supply was around $4.6 trillion. By 2023, it jumped to $21 trillion, over 4.5 times higher. But what about real income? In 1999, median household income was about $42,000. By 2023, it was just under $75,000. That's not even double. So money supply grew 4.5 times, but household income only 1.7 times. That's why so many feel stuck, surrounded by money, but never holding it. That's the silent math behind the paycheck problem. And now, you know the truth behind the missing raise.